Here.
Okay, we have a quorum, apparently. We have minutes from.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Have a second?
Second.
Any additions or corrections? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. First item of business, new business, is solar farm taxation. Rhonda, want to give us an update on that?
Good morning. Good morning. I'm Rhonda Novak, for those of you who I have not met. I'm the County Supervisor of Assessments, and I've been asked to just go through a quick overview of the taxation portion of solar farms or solar energy. I did hand out a packet. It is my understanding from the email I received yesterday that the governor did sign this yesterday, so that's very good. The taxation portion of solar energy is almost identical to wind energy. So there are a couple things that are important. One of the things is obviously the value per megawatt that we're going to value this at, and that value is $218,000 per megawatt market value. That, if you flip the page that looks like this over on the back, you can see that we have an example. We're assuming that this is a 2 megawatt nameplate capacity, so the example will show you what a 2 megawatt solar energy valuation system, or this system would be. So if you take the 218,000 times 2, 436,000, and there's a trending factor. That is something that comes out every year from the Department of Revenue. I'm using the 2018 assessment year trending factor because we don't have the 19 yet. That, again, is factored in, multiplied to come up with your cost basis of $531,920. We're going to depreciate that, in this case, by 1 year. We're going to come up with the depreciation, subtract that from the trended cost, come up with a fair cash value, and we assess everything in Will County as 33 1/3%. So we're going to multiply that and come up with an assessment of $170,000. Then applied to that will be the actual tax rate within whatever tax code that solar farm sits in. So it could be anywhere from probably 8% to the most average tax rate is about 9.5%. So it could be anywhere from 8 to 11, I would say, percentage-wise, depending upon how the taxing bodies levy. A couple things that I want to bring to your attention are that valuation is strictly for the solar energy system and the land that it sits upon. That is not the value. If there were any buildings added, we would assess those as we do any other type of building. And the other thing with solar energy is that the solar energy company has to, along with the owner, actually plat the area that the system is going to be within, so that we can map it, give it a PIN number so it receives a separate tax bill. By doing that, the solar energy company is responsible for the tax bill, but there is a caveat in the legislation that says before it would go to tax sale, if the company didn't pay the taxes, the owner can jump in and take care of that, so they wouldn't lose that piece of property at a tax sale. That's very important. It's a 35-year sunset on the legislation, so the legislation is good through 2033. If the solar energy system is removed, the piece of land goes back to farmland, assuming that it was farmed before the solar energy system was put there. It does not have to go through the 2-year waiting period like any other farm would have to if it weren't farmed. So that is huge for the farm community. I've attached in the packet a white paper from the Illinois Solar Energy Association. Basically talks about the same things that I've given you here today. Are there any questions? Just so I make sure I was clear and clarified. Yes, Judy?
You said the sunset was 35 years,
Yes.
so not 2033, 35 years, you said, right?
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah, 35 years. No.
Yeah.
Yes. 2018 to 2033. 15 years. I'm sorry. Oh my God. My brain is swarming
It's
with
okay.
numbers.
Just making sure that my brain wasn't the one.
No, it's fine.
So is it 15?
Yes.
15-year legislation? So, I have a question. So typically, what would the taxing bodies see as an increase if a solar farm actually comes to fruition on that property? What would the increase be for that compared to the ag? Let's just say, pick a random value. I mean, obviously it's random, but
It's going to be a pretty significant increase
pretty significant.
because that acreage, Sam, maybe you can help me. How much acreage do they use for a solar system typically?
Most of
What are you seeing?
most of what has come to Janine, I think, is 20 to 25 acres.
Okay, so you're going to see something 20 to 25 acres that would have had value and a tax bill based on a productivity index now have a value based on the 218,000 per megawatt. So it's significant. I could calculate that for you, but to do it on the fly right here would be difficult, but it is
No.
significant.
No, that's great. I just also wanted to say thank you for putting this together. Solar came to us, we weren't prepared. I know that Sam's working on a white paper as well, because I was traveling around giving presentations based on my best information. So I said draft. I didn't even want to touch the solar, the assessment, because that is not my thing, but Rhonda, I asked her and she got something together pretty fast, and then she tweaked it a couple times. I like the new final version with the little example at the bottom. I like that a lot. That's really great. So appreciate you for doing that, because it helps make it clear for those in the communities that would be benefiting from a solar farm to see that. So, I mean, some people are opposed to the solar farms, they don't want to have it in their area. And I know change is hard, and I agree with that, and I get that. But the benefit is, especially like some out in the Creed Township where school taxes are so high, this should help with some of that burden. So thank you so much for putting that together.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Weigel. Thank you.
Okay, our first case is special use permit 18-019 for public utility in Peotone. Margie, if you want to give us an update?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. ZC 18-048 is a special use permit for a major public utility. This case pertains to a 3.36 acre parcel located at 31831 South Rathje Road in Peotone Township, and is improved with a 6,269 square foot pole barn. This site was previously used as a vehicle storage and towing yard, which the village intends to modify as an office and storage yard for the Public Works Department. Staff recommended approval of a special use permit, and there were no objections. Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval and voted 4-0, and recommended that the county board approve the special use permit for a major public utility. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions by committee? there any objectors to this? Okay, can we have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. The next case, procedure 18009, is for a special use permit for a solar farm in Manhattan. Janine?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to address the next three cases, so DC 18009, 010, and 011. Altogether, they were addressed altogether in your memo as well that you received. So staff has been working since these cases were heard at land use regarding the AMA, so the Agricultural Impact Mitigation Agreement. We have been working with the state to try to get clarification on the legislation. We still have not received confirmation from the state regarding the legislation, so we have drafted the condition, and you can see that it is condition number 13 that we are asking to be added. So we're asking that this condition be added to these three cases, sort of covering both contingencies. Because right now we are unsure if these solar farm developers are going to be held to enter into the AMA with the Department of Agriculture. And in that case, then we will just be asking for a copy of that signed agreement. If they are not required to enter into the AMA with the Department of Ag, then they will be required to enter into a local AMA with us. State's attorney has reviewed this condition. We have also worked on this condition with legal counsel for Community Power Group for these three solar farm cases, and they agree to the language here that is before you. We would also ask that, and you can see I have them outlined for each of the different zoning cases. For example, for zoning case 009, that condition number 9 be amended to remove the verbiage and addendum. For 010 is the same condition, and then 011, the same condition as well, be amended. I'll take any questions you might have.
Okay, any questions by committee?
What's the holdup with the state? Why do we not know that yet?
We have been working with them and basically receiving different directions of who to speak to in the state, whether it's Department of Ag, whether it is the legislators themselves. They have also been very slow with responding to us and stating, that they're looking into it, that they're reviewing it, that it's our state's attorney's job to review and make interpretations of the legislation. So it's just been an ongoing process to get a final determination, which is why we've drafted this up to cover both situations.
Good. I'm glad, because I knew that's a hard thing we've been juggling all along since a whole year practically now, right? So I'm glad it's covered either way. That's good. Thanks, Jane.
Any other questions by committee?
Second.
I have a motion for approval. Are there any objectors to these cases? Okay, no objectors. Okay, we have to add these conditions,
Make a
Case.
motion to amend as requested for staff.
Okay.
Second.
Amend as requested by staff for condition 9, 13, and 14 to be added on case number 09. Motion to approve the amendments. Motion second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And we have a motion to approve as amended.
Second.
Is that all three or?
All three.
We'll do one at a time.
That's amended.
All right.
One at a time, first one is amended.
Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, for case 010, to approve the
I
amendments.
have a comment.
Okay.
So the DC-18-010 is in Wilton Township. It's right at the corner of Route 50 and West Offner Road. The only thing I want to make a comment there is that we have the conversation, because what's happening is there are solar farm after solar farm after solar farm coming to us, okay? What I think we really need to do as a whole is have a conversation to determine what is the maximum we're gonna have. Are we gonna have all of eastern Will County covered in solar farms with an empty spot open for where there might be an airport one day? Or are we gonna look at variables? Now, with this one here, a lot of the residents in the area were quite upset with it because it's right next to Raccoon Grove. They feel there's lots of deer and everything that would be impacted. So that's a conversation I think we need to have is every location the right location to allow this type of thing? We don't approve zoning for everybody who comes forward. We do deny a lot of different situations. It's something to think about. As you go down into the solar farm today too, you'll see the Soil and Water Conservation District has done a LISA score, which a LISA score tells you what the value of the prime farmland is, and 30 is the highest, and what number some of them are is, some are 28, 29. This is a conversation I think we need to have. I think we need to look at what we want to do with our regional planning, just like we talked with, as a board, a whole talk without any discussion determining anything, as with the animal freight facilities, how much are we going to do? I don't want us to come to the point where we have all solar farms covering everywhere. We really need to take into consideration what we're going to go, how far we're going to go with that. And isn't that I oppose a solar farm? I just think this is a conversation we should have. We don't have that conversation or any conversation about it outside of this room. So I just wanted to make that comment. And because of that, I'm going to be a no on this current one, just simply to state that we need to have that conversation that has to be had. So thank you.
Okay, we have case
Can I?
010. This is,
Yeah, Samantha, I just want you to make a clarification on, there's only some, I know that there's a whole lot of applications. How many a year are actually approved
Well,
throughout the United States?
it's not a number of the solar farms themselves. I guess you could break it up that way because they can either be 2 megawatts or 4 megawatts now that that's been finalized. It's 156 megawatts that's going to be accepted into the community solar program, and there is over 2.2 gigawatts of applications in ComEd. That was about a month ago. So I mean the odds are very low because all these folks have to get their interconnect has to work out, all their economics have to pan out, they have to have approval from the landowner, they have to have their local permits. So it is a lot. That doesn't mean they can't go for another incentive route, but that hasn't been what we've heard. So I can't say a percentage because I don't know what exactly the interconnect applications that are in at ComEd are right now, and that includes pre-application and final application. So some people say that that's a little bit of an overinflated number, but even still, it's not just Will County 156 megawatts, it's the entire ComEd territory. So I can try and get clarification from ComEd on what percentage they think where they're at with their total application.
And where you're going with that, I believe, Lori, is that there is already a cap.
Correct.
Oh, yes.
So,
Mhm.
okay,
So you're right.
Second, is that right?
So I still would like to say something, Denise. So while that is all true, that is definitely true. I've done more study on this issue than probably everyone in the room except for probably our land use staff. And I do know that at a meeting I was at in Beecher, they had ComEd come out and speak on that particular issue. And at that point, I think it was like a month or two ago, I can't remember exactly, that they had received 450 interconnection agreements at that time, and of which you could expect 60 to be chosen for the next lottery. There would be 2 more lotteries. So I understand that every solar proposal that comes before us will not be accepted because of the various different things. Some are way off the connection line, it would cost too much money to do that, but they're trying to get in. I get all that, that's definitely something that I understand. I asked us way back in, I believe it was March, when I was at Governmental Affairs with the Farm Bureau, I asked that we table this. And I know that there are people sitting on this land use committee who felt it was very appropriate to just go ahead and pass every solar farm. And here we are today, we're still not sure where we're sitting with things. And there's a lot of issues we needed to be addressed, specifically with the AMA, to ensure that there are no negative impacts to the surrounding neighbors. So I've done a lot more homework and research on this topic than everybody, so I get all those facts, Lori, I get all those facts, I get your questioning. So, and I know that when I was in Springfield, you were very much opposed to tabling those solar farms, but the point is, we need to make sure we're doing things right. We can't be working off of a hypothetical here. We gotta know what we're doing and set something in place that makes sense, because we don't wanna be kicking around to the what-if scenario. We wanna make sure that we have answered all those what-if scenarios just in case, because maybe Eastern Will County is a really good location because we're very close to certain comment facilities. I don't know that, and I don't know that anyone in this room knows that, so that's why I'm
That
asking
is
that.
true. The infrastructure, electrical infrastructure is suitable in that area, which is why likely
Don't take yours out.
why you've seen a concentration of applications in that area.
Right, so that's just my whole thing, and I know that residents are concerned about it, so they need to know that we're doing our due diligence, that we are looking at every situation, and we are asking every question, so that we can have that, we don't want to be in a situation to say, what if we didn't do this, and what if we didn't do that? So,
The white
thank you.
paper that was requested by committee is in progress. I just want to make sure it's comprehensive. I don't want to bring something that is not all-inclusive. It talks about what will happen if a solar panel breaks in a tornado. Janine wrote up the entire zoning section, so you all can understand those permitting processes. And that I would ask that the committee add to the agenda for the next land use committee for a draft presentation.
Great, and I know you guys couldn't put anything out there because it's been a constantly changing target, and I know that, and Wanda was lucky with hers was nice, easy legislation, she could put that together, so I get that, and I know you guys have been working on it, I appreciate it, thank you.
Samantha, thank you for the clarification, and thank you for all the hard work you guys have.
Steve, you got a comment?
Yeah, Mr. Mooses at Executive Committee this week pointed out that we really need to look at our regional effects to all these different things that we do as far as roads, warehouses, and solar falls in that category too. You know, what Judy was saying makes sense, that we need to have a regional approach to this. How is this going to affect everything? Because frankly, I don't think it was pointed out, I agree, that most of these local little cities and villages, they don't know how to handle all this stuff. And so if we just keep building and nobody can handle it, we're going to have a problem. So, you know, I kind of agree with Judy that we need to look at what's the consequence of this stuff. Not that this is a bad project, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that, you know, I agree with Judy and I agree with what Mr. Moose has said and John Brewing from CED. Everyone said the same thing. We need to look at this as what's going to happen to the whole area. So that's something for us all to think about.
Any other comments? Okay. Do we have a motion to approve ZC 18 or 010?
Did you guys vote on the amendment yet? I don't think you moved on the amendment, did you?
No. We'll get it on the floor. No, we didn't.
So I'm looking for approval of 010 as amended.
No, well, let's make the amendments first. Motion for the amendments for 010, condition 9, 13, and 14.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Then a motion to approve as amended.
Move.
Second. Any objectors to this change? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
One no. Okay. Next case, 011. Any questions?
This is
Beecher, Illinois, on Dixie Highway. Any questions by committee?
I move to amend.
18-029, the solar farm in Beecher. Jessica?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I begin, zoning cases ZC-18-029 and ZC-18-030 are right next to each other. So the commission probably noticed, or the committee probably noticed that in the staff report. So a lot of the comments that we received from various agencies reference the project as a whole for both parcels, but they are individual pieces. So I'll speak to each one specifically. Both are located on the south side of East Goodnow. ZC 18029 is located directly south of a previous solar farm, the first one that came through County Board, where that special use permit was approved. So it's worth noting that now within kind of the same area, and I know it was mentioned that, where are we locating the solar farms? Are they coming into one area specifically? Maybe that's worth looking into, especially because now we're looking at 3 in the same vicinity. But this zoning case is for about 20.6 acres. It's in the special use permit area actually occupied by the panels and the equipment. The entire parcel is about 80.7 acres. There were no objectors present at the Planning and Zoning Commission hearing. We did receive an email objection, which I handed out as a memo for you to review. It was discussed at the Planning and Zoning Commission hearing that both Sam Leamer and the agent Justin Hart have spoken in great depth with the objector to address as many concerns as possible. Following that public hearing, I did forward the email to Borrego Solar Systems Inc. so they can make sure to address any remaining concerns. It was also requested by the Creek Township Plan Commission to get a copy of that email. So I did receive an email from John Shinsky of Creek Township Plan Commission. So, he felt that maybe all but one of those concerns were addressed through the township hearings, through the open houses. And he states here the Illinois Farm Bureau, Will County Board Member Ogala, and other members have worked hard to ensure the viability of prime farmland. So he does speak to that he feels that the township and staff has tried to address many of those concerns that come up from our constituents. So that is ZC 18029. Now, again, I'll address the other one separately, but we are receiving the same comments from both. So I'll take any questions.
Okay, any questions by committee? Okay, do we have a motion to approve? Motion second. Are there any objectors to this change?
So when we made the amendments to the previous ones, that's because they were solar farms that we've been looking at for like 3 months and table. If these are new, then I just want to make it clear that those amendments are as is and these, and we don't have to make any amendments to those.
That's correct. Condition number 8 addresses that same amended additional condition that was added to those previous solar cases that speaks to the AMA and takes into, either situation depending on the interpretation of the Senate bill. So that's correct.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that's clear. Thank you.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case opposed 3-0.
So as I mentioned, zoning case ZC-18-030 is adjacent to the east. So it's the same solar farm developers, Borrego Solar Systems. Similar size, the location's a little bit differently on site, and we received the same type of objections and comments. Again, no objectors were present at the Planning and Zoning Commission public hearing, and we haven't received any additional correspondence since then.
Any questions by committee? Okay, we have a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion second. Any objectors to this? No objectors. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case is ZC 18032, solar farm in Manhattan. Jimmy?
This solar farm 032 is in Wilton Township. from the staff report because it was received after the staff report was completed, but the commissioner did attend the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting and spoke to his concerns that were outlined in that letter as well. And then we also had the neighbor who is directly adjacent to the south in the residential property. And the neighbor, spoke to certain concerns she had regarding the plantings and the panels themselves, just some general questions that she had about the solar panels. I would not say that she was objecting outright to the development, just had some questions that were addressed. So staff recommended approval of the solar farm developments with 10 conditions, and that was approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission with those 10 conditions.
Thank you. Any questions by committee? Okay, is there some public comment?
Yes.
Want to come down to the podium? State your name, folks.
Good morning. My name is Raymond Nugent Jr. I am Highway Commissioner for Wilton Township. Long story short, we're not opposed to the solar farm. The resident that did share concerns is, I think, the same thing that we all have. There's just not a lot of history of them. My concern is that we enter into a road use agreement with the construction people, which right now that we are at, my attorney's out of town, so we can't get it done until next week. I ask you to amend your amendment by saying that we have that condition that we are able to have this road use agreement in place prior to a building permit being issued. Because of the prior problems that we've had with utilities and other work in the township, they've issued surety bonds, and they are absolutely useless. You guys, when Explorer Pipeline went through, had a letter of credit, which gives you a little bit of teeth when you have to go back if there's a road use dispute.
What do you plan? You'd like them to rebuild your road or something?
No, we just, not rebuild it. If everything goes according to the plans, which doesn't always happen, they are going to have an entrance off Route 52, which should not affect our road, but they have already loaded equipment and used our road as a staging area. History tells me that prior to this entrance being put in, they're going to use our roads. It also tells me that we may tell them to use one road, but they're going to be on 5 different roads. It's just the nature of the beast.
Questions?
No, I get what you're saying, I understand. I would like to table this until they can come back with a specific, a specific request. Many times I know they bring in those heavy equipment, and that'll tear up roads faster than, anything will. And townships have limited funds. I
Yes,
get that.
my budget last year was $130,000 for 51 miles, so it doesn't go far. But
So I would like to make a motion to table it until next month.
Second.
Do you think you can, if you have another month, you think you can work it out?
we could have it done in 2 weeks. I don't want to hold these guys up. Could we just amend your main motion by stipulating that you don't issue a building permit until we come to agreement, which I'm sure that we can.
Right, so Ray, it's not holding them up?
I don't want to hold them up.
You're not holding them up, I would prefer that you guys have that agreement in place before we go and make an amendment to that. I think that makes the most sense. So if we table it, they can come back next month, and you guys can have that in place. That way,
Okay.
the conditions in there, everything is done.
No, I understand. I just, you know, my mode of being here today isn't to hold them up, it's that we
You
can,
won't be holding them up. I understand.
because I got closed 52 last night and my phone rang until midnight and then started again at 4:30 this morning because of trucks being all over God's creation.
Denise?
Just curious, are there any township ordinances governing the use of the road?
We do have ordinance as far as 12-ton weight limits. We have a 5-ton frost law for the wintertime that, you know, we try not to enforce or try not to use. We try to come to terms prior to the work. But like I said, surety bonds are absolutely useless because we're in court now with Edison, with ComEd, over road damage that they are saying, and 2 of their contracts are saying, nobody did it. Nobody knows how it happened, but they're not responsible. So we need something in place that gives us a little bit of leverage.
Right, and so.
And that's why we need your help.
And that's why it makes sense to have
A condition in the approval that would say they have to be there at the local.
That would be in the agreement, but more importantly, if they issue a letter of credit, if we can't come to a road repair agreement, you know, post-construction, then we can draw on that letter of credit if need be. It's something nobody wants to do, but history tells me that if I don't have something, I have absolutely nothing. So when would the next meeting be so we can?
Be a month from
Just 1 month.
second Tuesday in September.
All right, so I get to see you again in September then. All right, thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to table. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, motion carries. The other business, we have Colin with the cargo container.
Not cargo containers, but auto salvage. Or auto salvage. Does it say cargo container there?
Yes,
Then that's, then I misread it. No. I have auto salvage.
Our agenda says cargo container.
The first one.
No, you know what? And the paper is, right, the paper version says use of cargo
Okay,
container.
if we're doing cargo containers, we can do cargo containers.
So the online document says
It's
auto
different.
salvage, and
And
it
the
says cargo.
paper version says opposite.
Okay. Well, I would like to do both.
Yeah.
If we, I don't know if we can. But for cargo containers, there was a presentation up to months ago regarding using cargo containers as dwelling units. And we wanted to digest some of the information that was provided and give us some feedback as to what your responses would be. And so that would be that part of the discussion. We're looking at cargo containers, basically amending the ordinance to allow, there are provisions in the ordinance right now for cargo containers for temporary use under certain provisions. The idea is to make those conditions permanent in select districts.
Your handout you get a printout and walk us through that,
Okay,
explain it
I can do that.
item by item so we understand it.
Excellent, all right. Now, do we have auto salvage on your agenda?
Okay, we'll go to auto salvage.
Okay, that's what I have. During our lengthy ordinance update this past year, we were trying to get the junkyard and salvage up to speed with the current language of the state statutes. And we missed a subsection of that, and that is the auto rebuilder. Not auto body repair, but these are the folks that will take a totaled vehicle and bring it back up to roadworthiness. But they cannot sell it as a regular vehicle, they have to sell it as a salvaged vehicle. And we do not have that specific use in the zoning ordinance, and we are looking to insert that into the use table. It would be the two items at the bottom of the page. The auto rebuilder completely in an enclosed building. We're anticipating it to be a permitted use in all the I districts, and an auto rebuilder that only has outdoor storage, or with outdoor storage, would be a special use in only the I3.
Any questions by committee?
Is this too strict, or that's strict enough? That would be my question.
I mean, I think it could be too strict. It could be too strict because, I mean, obviously in I and C's, they might be doing that there, but I know that there could be some people that might do it in A1, I guess. I'm not really sure. I think that's something we've not really talked too much about. So it's possible that somebody might do it as a hobby on their property or something like that. How big of a process are you thinking this would be, like?
I guess what are you talking as a process?
I mean, would you think this would be somebody who's just doing a couple cars? And
No, this would be a business.
This would be a business.
Full-time business.
What's the difference between, I'm sorry, between an I2 and an I3? Just, I don't remember all that in it.
Lot size and the intensiveness of the use, the minimum lot size.
That I understood.
Right, but that's basically what.
What's the difference in the lot sizes? I mean, how, you know,
Okay.
that's, I mean, I understood the lot size, but how much different?
I believe it's only difference of a couple of acres.
Okay.
So why would we want to allow it in,
I2, that's what I,
in all of them?
you know.
And I1, I2, I3? I don't know. What's the reasoning behind restricting it to certain ones in
Because
I and C?
it would be in keeping with the junk, the top item, or the one in the middle, the junk or salvage yard, except as identified below. That is a special use in I3 only. So because we're dealing with outdoor space, the idea was to keep it as a special use in the I3 district, similar to the junkyard.
Not that it's a junkyard, but they would have lots of stuff around.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. We can always amend it if we find that we need to make a change in the future.
Brian?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I think the best thing to do when you think about this use is think just auto repair. Because essentially what it is instead of fixing somebody's damaged vehicle from whatever occurrence that happened by, is just rebuilding a vehicle. So it's very similar to an auto repair. So it's following the same places on where auto repair would be allowed, with the exception of we don't want to allow people to do this outside on a normal basis. So that's why it would be a special use if you're wanting to do this activity outside. You wouldn't want to encourage that in an industrial park or, you know, a commercial. I think you said it was C4 zoning. So that's how I would look at this use.
And then there's also, ultimately the auto sales portion of it as well.
Jim sit down and talk to you or staff or something about what he would like to see.
Okay. Were there any comments from committee?
Well, I know that we did talk about this, and we said, I don't know how we could determine how many people are in the room at one time, if you're doing at-home yoga, or if you have something like that type of a business. And we said there could only be so many customers or people at a time there, so I know that was a conversation. I don't recall what Jim said too, so maybe we'll have a conversation with him and see, because I don't recall him saying anything about it, but maybe I wasn't listening.
No, I don't recall, but we talked about it here, and, we pointed out that if you have a home business and you're doing yoga, you might have 10 or 15 people come for an hour and do yoga in a week. So, I think the opinion of our group here was that should be allowed. And then, I think one of the things that we were talking about, beauty salons in Holland.
Yes.
And they said, well, you could have 2 chairs and you could have how many people?
Yeah, that was already.
The whole problem with all that is, again, enforcement.
Right.
So if you have a beauty salon out of your house and you got 4 people, you got 2 chairs, you got 2 people waiting, or 3 people, how do you start putting limits on it? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yes. You're looking for language on enforcement in that.
Well, it's kind of like a waste of time to say, we're going to have, we say you can only have 5 people for, and that's it.
Okay.
Well, what happens if 6 comes? Who's going to come out? You're going to
Right.
call the
Right.
enforcement police for 1 more person? You know what I'm
Oh,
saying?
yeah, yes, yes.
So I'm of the opinion that if it's a home business, they should be allowed to
All
have
right. So this
people come, and it depends on the business, so, you don't want to have a business where it's like 8 hours a day constantly going back and forth with trucks and cars, but you could have, like they were saying, a yoga place.
All right. All of this is, all of the discussion on the number of people is new text. That can easily be eliminated by inserting in header line. So if you would like to.
I'd be in favor of eliminating the number of people altogether.
Yeah.
And, and if we find that there's a problem, then we don't have to address it like that, but we do have other ordinances, like a nuisance ordinance and things like that. So, there's other ways to address, because most of the small businesses don't want to have a problem with their neighbors.
Okay. So what I'll do is come back with the new text deleted and find out from Mr. Mustis what exactly his concerns were and come draft new text. If it is substantially different than what has been provided in the past, it's going to have to go back to the public hearing. But we'll come to that if necessary.
Reagan, you had a comment?
I think you're heading towards the right way. I would cautious you inserting any language about the amount of persons that would be there, because enforcement-wise, now you're encroaching on search and seizure. You do not want land use, having to get warrants, going in the house to regulate how many people are in there. There's language on the amount of vehicles and parking, and that can be more regulated and is more visibly seen by the inspector. So I would steer clear of regulating the persons.
Okay. Denise?
Just for my own edification, we have a list of exactly what kinds of businesses can be considered home. Is that true or not?
No, it's, we have a list of what is not a home
Okay.
occupation.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion to table this.
Motion to table.
Or should we just remove it?
I thought we were just going to remove the language restricting the amount of people.
Well, apparently Mr. Mustis had some concerns as well.
Yeah, he wanted to.
It seems to me that from those concerns, this is what I kind of remember, and it did not come back to me. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't sit on that committee, but with some of it kind of started steering towards parking. Did it not? Did it moving on, and then finally, it was said that a lot of these places are, parking is public, so it kind of went back to the parking, which I thought really
You're right.
that's what I thought.
That's what, yeah, I remember now when you
Wasn't
said
that?
that street is a public street.
Yes, we discussed that, and we removed that language, yes.
Right,
Yes.
right.
And that's where the conversation was.
Right, I think,
Well, I think he had some other general concerns too, and wanted to look at the research,
That's fine.
the past practices that we had in this regard. And I think staff did bring together the changes over the past 10 years that we've made, but I don't see anything significant in those changes. But I think we should let Mr. Eustace review this again, if he has any further comments.
Did you say, Colin, that it would come back to public hearing?
If Mr. Eustace's concerns needed additional language, then it would have to go back to public hearing.
I'm thinking about board members. There may be others besides him who have some concerns or some input.
Oh, then.
Yeah, it's our committee, it's our
Move
discussion.
forward to the full board.
Right,
If you want to keep this going. you
So
can
I
do
would
a
like to make a
recommendation.
motion to
I'm sorry,
remove,
hear all that you said, Ray.
It's your committee, I mean, you guys hash this over and over, I mean, it's whatever your recommendation would go to the rest of the county board members. And I will personally tell you, I mean, I do not recall Mr. Musis having any, and Dave and I were just speaking, any specific concerns that, but I know that there was, you know, between the persons and the vehicles and how to enforce. But other than that, I mean, I would suggest you guys funnel for this. I mean, you can make a recommendation and it's still before the rest of the county board members.
Thank you.
so I'd like to make a motion to remove, under N, section N 2, 3, and 4, where it limits the amount of people that could come for the various different type of businesses that were listed. I'd like to make a motion to remove those from the ordinance.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, motion carries. Okay, so you'll take that back to the public hearing?
No, this wouldn't be required,
Right.
go back to public hearing, this can go forward to.
So I'd like to make a motion to approve as amended, go to the full board.
Correct.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, motion carries. Okay. So does this go to the board this week, or?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Next item is beekeeping. Colin?
Yes, beekeeping, apparently there was some discussion regarding what is and what is not eligible for egg exemptions in Will County, since our population is over 400,000 people. Egg exemptions are not applied to any property less than 5 acres, even if it's an egg use. So we can regulate size, setback, bulk, and use with regard to beekeeping. But if it is an agricultural use greater than 5 acres, then the egg exemption comes into play.
What is the egg exemption?
The egg exemption would be that the county cannot enforce the majority of the zoning regulations with the exception of setbacks for an agricultural use.
Okay. Does this just apply to A1 and A2?
Correct. And agriculture needs to be the primary use.
Okay, there was also discussion about retail sales. That's allowed, where they just ag?
Yes, sales would be permitted in, commercial sales of honey, bee products, and bees are permitted in the A1, C6, and the public, the SBPO, which is the parks, special use in parks.
Okay.
sales of honey is permitted by special use in the A2 and E districts, and then prohibited in, commercial sales of honey is prohibited in the R districts.
Okay, there was discussion to allow it in the R district. Any committee members have any comments?
Yeah, Tom, I thought it should be allowed if they have bees, they're gonna get, I was told that most of the hives get no more than 5 jars of honey. And if that's true, you know, they should be allowed to sell 4 of their jars. You know, I mean, what would stop, like enforcement? What are we gonna do if they have 4 jars of honey and they keep one for themselves? So are we gonna say to them, oh, you know, we're gonna call the police because you sold 4 jars of honey?
We have to figure out what commercial sales would be.
So, what I'm getting at is, if it's such a small quantity, we're not talking about a big quantity. So why tell them they can't sell it? Because what will happen is, some neighbor will call up and say, my next door neighbor bought a jar of honey from so-and-so, and then you're gonna go out and, you know, they're in trouble. You're talking about too small quantity to even make a rule for it, I think. Okay. So I would just say that these people that have the hives, they can sell their honey wherever they are. Okay.
Small quantities, though, would they be covered by the home-based business?
As a home occupation? Yes.
Should we require a special use for that, do you think, or committee?
Because retail sales is prohibited, that's right, because retail sales is prohibited under home occupations. So yeah, it's a double whammy.
Where the problem is, you get a special use permit, that costs a lot of money.
Right.
And then, how much money can they sell their honey for $2? So you're talking about $10 worth of honey that they could possibly sell, and they're gonna spend how much for a special use?
We could, go back to agricultural exemptions. Other counties, under 200,000 people, their exemption, they have a limit of $1,000 in a calendar year. So we could model it after that commercial sales under, so commercial sales went over $1,000.
No, why don't you just say it could be from 1,000 to 1,000,000? I was gonna.
Well, so if it's under $1,000, it's not.
How would you know that? But I'm talking about when government makes laws that they can't enforce, it's ridiculous. So we need to do things that we can actually enforce. So we say you can't sell more than $1,000, and they're getting a debt. So supposedly you get 5 jars of honey, and I don't even know how big the jar is, for a beehive for your season. And then you turn around and say, if you sell them, I don't even know what honey sells for, but let's just make it $2. So you sell the 5, it's $10. So you can sell how many jars? Well, you don't have enough hives to make 1,000.
Right, exactly.
You know, so I mean, so why make a number? Just say that they can sell whatever they want out of their hives, and then we're all their day.
We're also trying to avoid having retail sales in a home.
Just allow the beekeepers to sell their honey, no matter what zoning it is.
The state attorney comment?
If you're gonna do that, are you gonna allow the gardeners that have, you know, like a lot of corn or tomatoes to sell out of the house? You gotta be consistent. You gotta have equal protection for all the parties. You may allow one because you're pro honey, but you're gonna get somebody that says, you know, I got a whole bunch of potatoes I'd like to sell because I grew them in my backyard. Or, you know, I wanna, you know, whatever they wanna sell. I mean, sometimes it's better not to authorize it. If they're selling 5 jars, we're not gonna have an enforcement issue because the neighbors aren't gonna know they're selling 5 jars. So why do we even need to address it and make it legal or illegal? Just leave it the way it is.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay, so blank it out. Okay.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Don't even touch it. I agree with Phil.
I guess the question for the state's attorney is, do we have to blank it out for all the districts?
What do you mean?
For commercial sales of honey in the, so shall we say, the estate districts where you can have more beehives. That'd be,
Again, that's a policy consideration, but all I'm saying is you can't really treat honey different than other agricultural products in those districts. You don't just take one type out and say that's okay.
all right.
Either you gotta authorize sales in a state district of, up to 1,000 or of agricultural products or not. I mean, let's face it, we all know people sell Mary Cat at their house, Tupperware, all kinds of things. We don't address those. I don't see why we need to really address the honey issue, other than there's some neighbors that get mad because they don't like beehives at their neighbor's house because they don't like the bees buzzing around their yard. And, that is a little different. But it's a policy decision. You can do it any way you want to do it. I'm just saying, do it, be consistent.
Well, let's just leave it the way it is then, and not talk about retail sales on residential. Okay. Any comments back here from the Farm Bureau concerning bees? John? Yeah.
You're doing nothing, I guess there'd be no reason to comment.
You're happy? Okay.
I can throw out some facts and figures and add a little numbers.
Okay. Any comments from the public concerning this? No? Okay, so we need a motion to approve our ordinance as presented.
Motion. We need a motion.
I'm sorry, I do need a clarification. What was the decision on the beehive height? Is it measured at the base or at the ground?
I would really like to have our Farm Bureau representative come up and speak on that conversation, because I think that we need, as a group, we need to know from his expertise, the information on it, before we can make a decision on height.
John Keefner, Hoff Road, and I am a beekeeper, third generation farmer. Now, back up here. According to the Illinois State Bee Association, the average honeybee hive produces 40 pounds a year. 2012 and this year, because bees like it hot, we're probably going to hit 80 to 100 pounds a year. I sell in pints and quarts. Makes everybody feel happy because people that buy honey like the can. They're glass reusable jars. They're not plastic. They don't have to worry about BPA. So I do invite the public to my house to buy my honey. But my father-in-law is going to invite the public to buy 2 bushels of tomatoes next week because he's got too many tomatoes. So we have all those issues. So I kind of like the consensus that if we're regulating the number of hives or the number of beehives in E2, 2 hives, that person's going to have between 40 and 200 pounds of honey. It's not a lot. There is another caveat to this. You mentioned incidental business pursuits. As a farmer, I have that on my farm owner's policy. It means I can board 2 horses. I can sell a few things. It does not cover honey. It covers egg sales. You get salmonella from eggs. But I know nothing you can get from honey. I don't get it. But so I have to buy a special commercial policy, $2,500 a year. $2,500 worth of sales, $250. So here we go, 10% gone right off the top. And I am probably fibbing. I think I'm up to about 5,000 pounds, or $5,000 a year. So my insurance agent isn't listening. And I sent out a quick email on this height of the beehive. It's irrelevant. There is a best management practice that most beekeepers will follow. And my wife bought stacking tomato cages. And we can stack them 9 foot high. We stacked them 9 foot high. Is it normal? No. Does it make sense? No. Hopefully a thunderstorm comes through tonight and blows it over. It's like, experiment ruined. We'll never do it again. But I guarantee you, somebody in the county would say, look at how high them tomato cages are. They shouldn't be that high. But we don't need to regulate the height of the beehive any more than we do the tomato cage. But there is one scientific point to be made here. The beekeepers' research to prevent swarms, colonies from actually absconding and going to your neighbor's hollow tree, going into your neighbor's soffit, the best science, they say, to prevent swarms is to give the bees plenty of room. So we get this real hot weather, you haven't had time to take off the honey yet, you stack a couple more supers on there. So if you limit the height of a hive, you're going to tell somebody, maybe I can't put another super on there and my bees might swarm, and that's not what we want. And we certainly don't want them coming saying, oh, this guy just added 5 more inches. Now he's 4 inches over the limit. And I got something for later, but I think that should be enough for bees.
John, I wanted to ask you a question. I'm sorry, I wasn't following everything that you said exactly, but could you please explain explain, you said you have a certain policy that you have to buy for what was that specific? Not related to honey.
For honey, I have to buy a commercial business policy.
Right, so anybody who has a beehive in their yard and they want to sell it, do they have to?
They should be checking with their homeowner's policy. If you have a party, birthday party, if somebody falls and breaks their arm, your homeowner's policy is probably going to cover that. Now, if you have a party, let's say you have a party and you actually invited people, you're making money. You've got to know what's an incidental business pursuit and what your policy covers. So it's kind of, one of the things about farmers markets, many people go to farmers markets and they're not aware they should have another business policy. They may not be covered under their homeowners. And as we were told at a beekeeping meeting, I guarantee you, if somebody trips and falls at your farmer's market in front of your booth, you will probably be sued. And I believe most farmers markets do require some proof of a policy that covers you while you're there. But I mean, this really gets to dotting the i's and crossing the t's. But I have people that they just give the honey away because they don't want to get into that. Well, maybe if I sold a couple jars and something goes wrong, I could be sued. But there is a bit of a way around that. But I mean, that's for each individual person to find out. And I know that Will County Beekeepers has a very good job of educating people, talking to them. The insurance guy that came and talked to us said he had 350 insurers in beekeeping, and they had 120 claims. They paid for a house that burned from somebody that sold candles. They sold from jars that broke. They even had to pay when a kid trespassed and pushed the hives over and had to go to the hospital. So there's a lot of craziness out there.
Thank you. Okay, Colin, what's your question again about the height?
Yes.
We don't have a height restriction?
There'll be, currently, there's language for the beehives not to exceed 5 feet in height. And the question that was posed is that distance measured from the ground or from a base of the hive?
Sounds like we're beekeepers, we don't have that in there at all.
Correct. That is their desire, but again, it is a policy decision for you. Because we're dealing mostly with, in this case, the honey hobbyists. So it would be a residential concern if you're having extremely high beehives.
I don't see that on here, on our agenda. What line item is that?
It would be on the third page, number 6, so 3A6, maximum height and size. No single hive shall exceed 5 feet in height, and no single hive shall exceed 20 cubic feet in size. So the question is,
No height restrictions on ours.
Ours shows no height restrictions, but it also says no single hive shall exceed 20 cubic feet inside. So that is a restriction.
Brian?
I'll speak loudly. I think it was either last month or 2 months ago, this committee actually voted to remove the height restriction. It's not in there.
Okay.
so I have an old version. Okay. That explains why I have an old version. All right. So it has already been removed. All right, then the discussion is all for naught.
What about cubic feet?
Yes, so now the question is,
Is that 20 cubic feet become an issue though? Is what I'm thinking.
He's doing the math.
Yeah.
My quick math says that would be 13 feet high, so that would be more than that.
Okay, I was just making sure that 20 cubic feet didn't become a problem. All right, because I think the last thing this committee wants to see is swarms of anything, you know?
because there are other beehive size that go laterally as well.
Right, that's fine. Okay.
Okay, is there any public comment concerning the bees? Judge comes down the podium.
Yeah, we do have to amend it. We have to amend it to sales.
Hi, my name is Rachel Ventura. I live in Joliet, and I just wanted to say thank you to Salvage for some very good reasoning, and I don't know if you guys had agreed or not agreed to remove that the selling of the residents, but I agree, if you can enforce a law, it probably shouldn't be on the books, and many of the homeowners might be selling to the neighbors for $5. So I think that's very good to remove that from the bill, and I just want to say that, thank you for you guys for covering this, because I think bees and pollinating our fruits and vegetables is very important, and so this is a good step towards that, so thank you.
Okay, State's Attorney, we say now that it's prohibited selling of honey. If we just remove that and don't talk about it, can we do that?
Just remove it.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to remove the restriction prohibiting bee sales in any district.
I will second.
Honey in any district.
Yeah, I will second that.
Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, motion carries.
So this will go to, this will end up going to county board this month.
Okay. Since we're late in the meeting, we'll have a 5-minute recess. Thank you. Next item is agritourism. Brian?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This matter was before the committee last in the July meeting of the Land Use Development Committee. At that time, the committee was ready to send the text amendment to public hearing. The public hearing was conducted on August 7th, so that was 1 week from today, or 1 week, yeah, last week from today. So there were no people that came to speak on the topic, and the Commission conducted the public hearing and had no additional comments either. So the matter is now before the committee today to review. If you want, I'll just go over it quickly. Rural events category is a new category in the agritourism umbrella. The committee directed staff to identify the use as a special use permit that would be available for people in the A1 zoning district to apply for, and also the A2 zoning district. So the new rural events category was added there, and the use table was updated to include rural events under the agritourism umbrella. And rural events specifically are events and activities that are operating for profit and not open to the general public. Examples include wedding barns, event barns, or use of the property, or any portion to host weddings, parties, receptions, or other special events.
Okay, any questions by committee? Judy?
Yeah, I have a question. So earlier, can't really recall when, earlier we had a wedding barn in Creek Township. And can you give me background on that specifically and how that relates to this and what the difference is?
So that property, I know the name of the people that operate it. I believe it's Volek. It was a use that was in operation in violation of the county's zoning requirements. And that, this goes back, I think, to 2015 now. And they've, that was before the county had even introduced the agritourism category, which appeared in 2018, January 2018. So that property, because it was a use that was operating in violation, applied under an events, like special events category, like events of public interest or entertainment, and they applied for that special use permit. It was approved by the board, and then it had 2 extensions. Building permit's been issued, but they still have not completed the work. So we're still working on that property to bring it, to closure and close the building permit and issue the CO. So that facility is still not operating, but is allowed to operate as they were approved because it existed prior to the new language that's been proposed in the ordinance today.
I have a question. Brian, is that, what township is that in? I just want to be.
I believe it's on Bruns Road, I know it's in the eastern part of Wilton County.
So it's Washington Township?
Washington
Okay,
Township.
not great.
But they did have a special use permit.
Yeah, it was approved by the board a couple of years ago.
Okay. Any other questions by committee?
Yeah, I still, so he was operating that wedding barn and he had no special use permit at all. So I just, so what we're looking at today, is it similar, the exact same type of thing, isn't it?
Like if the Volick family came in to say, to the department and said, hey, I'm interested in doing this type of use, we would steer them towards, well, this is a rural event category and this would be the special use that would be available to apply for. It's a use that didn't exist before. The county worked with the homeowner who was in violation, or the landowner, to find a way to make it fit in the zoning code. That's what we did. It was a stretch of, trying to make it the perfect fit because it really wasn't exactly what it is, but it was all that we had available at the time. So, it's uses like that property and other ones that drove the change in the zoning code to introduce agritourism and now the rural events category, because before 2018, we didn't have an agritourism category at all that would take in uses like we're proposing today or any uses that fall in that category.
Any other comments?
So what is the cost of the special use permit for that?
Well, the special use permit, it's a commercial industrial permit. Cost, it's not a residential use, so it's commercial in nature. So it all is going to come down to how big do you want to make it. The special use permit cost, which is approved by the county board through the fee schedule, is $2,500 for 5 acres, and then it increases per acre as you keep going up, and then there's, it's $85 per acre as you go up, and then once you reach other thresholds, then it comes down to like $45 an acre, and keeps getting smaller the more property it is. So $2,500 is the base. A lot of people could probably fit their whole operation within 5 acres, but it does go up beyond that.
Is this is good forever then, special use, or does that expire?
Well, if it is the intent of the owner for it to be good forever, and that's identified in the application, then yes, it does, unless the committee and the board decides to place a condition on it that it's only good for this owner or for this period of time.
Okay. Any other questions? Any public comment concerns? Mr. Siegel, want to come to the podium? State your name.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Paul Siegel, Lockport Township. I fit into this category pretty closely. And my only real concern today is under the agritourism that is very new. There are 10 subcategories. I believe 7 of the 10 or 8 of the 10 are right of use uses, do not require special use. Since this one now kind of more defines a use that I would have, I would prefer it to be a right of use under the agritourism versus having the additional $2,500 or more special use permit cost to operate under the agritourism aspect of it, as 7 or 8 of the other subcategories already exist as rights of use rather than special uses. For me to fully use this, I would have to apply for a special use for ancillary liquor, which has its own special use cost. So combining the 2 special uses for this, I would just request that we don't have that level of expense for this new category. If I were to operate under the category that allows me to serve food, sit-down food produced on the farm, that's a right of use. And that allows events. I I guess, contend that weddings and other special events are events, that I could operate there. If I had less than 50% grown on the farm, then I may have to get a variance, which is a much lesser expense, which is what I was directed to go for. But then this category came up, which seems to better address actually what I'm doing. And so I would just like the two to be treated the same as a right of use rather than the extra expense and timeliness of the special use.
Okay. Any comments by the committee? Questions?
I have a question. How much, so basically you're saying you have to get a special use for the use of what you're doing, and then if you have liquor, you have to get a liquor license on top of that. What is the cost of a liquor license? And can you combine the two to make them?
Well, there's actually a special use cost plus the liquor license. So there's a special use cost that comes to you, and on top of that, there's a liquor license, which is an annual fee. Special use is a one-time fee.
Okay.
And I'm not trying to get out of either of those. I realize that when you deal with liquor, it's a special circumstance, and you want to have some restrictions. I'm not opposed to that. But in this category, we would have a second special use expense. And I would think that I'd only need that for the footprint that the building is on and what it's using, which would be well under 5 acres. But I'm also a little bit, I also fit under the agritourism aspect of it, so I don't know whether you can operate under several different categories on the same land, or, you know, when there's mixed uses. And, you know, under agritourism, I don't need a special use. That's a right of use.
Yeah, I got a question for Brian. I called Brian yesterday to, clarify some things, and, not in particular any one certain farm or anything else, but the reason that we go for special use, like by right, they have the zoning for ag tourism, but they have to get a special use for when they're going to do something that's going to be an ongoing type of thing. And the reasoning behind that is, like we're in Homer, we have some smaller farms, or if you want to call it, they're zone day one, they might not necessarily even be farms. But now if they turn around and say they want to put in something, like commercial use really, they're allowed to by right, because the zoning's there. And then where do they park? And so that's where what's going to happen to the neighbors around here. Now, I'm for property rights, 100%, but I can see where when you get into putting something that's commercial use in a certain area, it doesn't always fit. And that's the reason why you go for a special use. Not to pick on somebody and make them pay more money. It might, and I'm asking you if I'm correct, is so that we have some control of where this stuff goes. Because we don't want to, we were talking about a lot of different things, but we don't want to put something where there's going to be 150 cars in the neighborhood parking every time there's an event. And that could happen. Or it could happen where the structures aren't, they're not following the right rules for what they're doing. I mean, there's a lot of things that could go wrong. So am I correct in what I just said or not? I want to make sure.
Okay, Brian?
Yes, Board Member Bowledge, to be responsive to your question. The county board has determined through the passage of the zoning code that these are the uses that we feel that are acceptable as permitted by right. Agritourism is one of those. Typically, I'm just going to throw out one example, the pumpkin patch, okay? Or maybe you're going to have a Christmas tree farm. Okay, well that's limited in scope. It's going to occur from September 1st and it's going to be over November 1st. So the county board felt comfortable, okay, we can allow that as permitted by right. Now, when you get to another category like rural events, this could be, and we have to look at what could happen, not just maybe one example of, well, this is how I run my business, I would never do that. But you could have a rural events category where they're holding weddings or other events 4 or 5 days a week, because they could be corporate events, they could be political events, they could be organizational events, and then they got weddings Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So now you've introduced a use that may be much more intense than the limited pumpkin patch into an area that, you know, we can't plan for every situation. There's A1 zone property in every township, probably in almost darn near every section of every township. You can find an A1 property that's maybe, let's say it's a 5-acre property, completely surrounded by the village of Plainfield, and it's the only A1 property, and they say, hey, I'm gonna hold weddings here. You got homes surrounding that, and now all of a sudden they're subject to late night noise, lots of traffic, other things that maybe that we could have dealt with through a special use permit process to say, you know, that's just not appropriate in that location, or, you know what, we could live with that there, but these are the controls we want to put on it. When it's just a permitted by right, now the entitlement is given, and they can operate in any way that's permitted under the code.
Thank you. Any other comments by committee?
Brian, I appreciate that explanation because it does make a big difference. If I was going to do it on my farm, let's say, I might do pumpkins and have people come in and have a pumpkin, go pick your own pumpkin, something like that. That is definitely seasonal and maybe a couple times during that because I run out of pumpkins. And I understand your desire to do this, and I think it's great. I've heard lots of people who have been to your farm. I'm not, but I've heard all that. But this special use permit is a one-time charge, correct, Brian?
That's correct.
So it's a one-time charge, and it does protect the neighbors in the surrounding area so that if you're next to Debbie and Steve and Tom, they know that he has applied for special use. He is going to be abiding by this condition set by our land use committee who work day in and day out, making sure we have things in place that make sense. And if they don't make sense, we make a change to that. So I think that it's a good safeguard. I know that the Bullock Farm had to go through this process. It was different because it was the event, Agritourism wasn't there. But I'm glad that we brought that into our community to recognize all the great things that we do on farms and allow on farms. And I think that it's good that we allow this, but I think a special use is required.
Okay.
And then what I think at the last meeting we had, we said that any business that was already in existence was grandfathered in.
So if a business was legally established, you have to remember that you're a legally established use, meaning you met the code, then you would be grandfathered. So legally established and non-conforming means that you were doing it right when the code was adopted and the code changed. Now you are still legal under the code in your non-conforming state. You can't be illegally established. You don't have any rights.
Okay. Do you have any other comments, Mr. Steve?
No.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Any other public comment concerning this? Okay, could we have a motion to approve? Motion?
Second.
Second? All in favor say aye. Aye. Motion approved. Next case, wineries and brewing. Brian?
So the Planning and Zoning Commission did conduct a public hearing on August 7th to discuss the update to the tasting room requirement. And if you recall, back in July, this committee discussed the regulations pertaining to tasting rooms, which are affiliated with the, at that time, distilleries and breweries, of saying tasting rooms are permitted uses, provided you take a tour of the facility. So you can have a tasting room and you can sample our beverages, but you have to take the tour. So we received some correspondence from an operator of a distillery in unincorporated Will County who believed that that part of the ordinance requirement was putting that business at a disadvantage. because other jurisdictions don't require a tour in order to sample beverages. So the committee decided that we should go to public hearing and remove the provision that required the tour, and then also open up wineries as a permitted use. And this is, we're talking industrial zoning here, I-1, I-2, I-3, that they could have a tasting room permitted by right instead of requiring a special use permit. Why would you require a special use for a winery, but not for a brewery and a distillery? So it's uniform across the board now. As the draft is proposed, if you're an I-1, I-2, I-3, you can have a tasting room, and you do not require a tour now to sample beverages. So I want to make it clear that this is for products that are produced on site. This is not, you're not approving a bar per se. This is not ancillary liquor. If somebody wants to operate a restaurant, or like a brew pub or winery with restaurant, you still need the